women are not really aware how you need to play this game, right? I think often women still think doing good work is enough, and if you do good work, you get rewarded, but then that doesn't happen. And then you get this frustration and you're wondering why. Maybe you then start to work harder, trying to do even better work, and then you keep wondering why it doesn't pay off.
Hi Verena, super happy that you are here. Maybe you can also explain in the audience then why are you into this topic and what are you doing when not talking about female empowerment?
So I'm a woman in tech. I studied statistics and then started my career as a data scientist, machine learning scientist, spent almost 4 years as a research scientist at Amazon Alexa. And now, since the beginning of last year, I'm working as an independent consultant. So I'm helping companies navigate their AI journey from the very beginning through use case discovery strategy all the way through to implementation. But yeah, like you said, another part of my work is now also talking about or empowering women in tech. And I do that through a newsletter that I write. I go on podcasts, panels, give talks in companies, but also conferences or meetups. And I also just launched my Women in Tech coaching program.
What do some people think female empowerment means, but it actually doesn't?
Yeah, good question. So I'm not 100% sure what people usually think, but I think one of the misconceptions out there is definitely that female empowerment is about teaching women how to behave like men. Yeah. And I don't think that is the way it should be. Instead, I think what we need to do is to empower women to work, lead, and be in their own unique way, right? So that could be then a new way of leadership, including a different kind of style that is less about assertiveness, for example, but maybe more about empathy. Yeah, and also I think female empowerment is about acknowledging the challenges that women are still facing, but without falling into this victimhood role, and instead rather facing those challenges and moving forwards anyway.
How do you think did it develop that people think female empowerment means women need to be like men or behave like men?
So I think, in our society, that is what we value, right? We value when people are assertive, when they do a lot of stuff, when they're very analytical, logical, and everything that is like the rather feminine qualities, like intuition, creativity, empathy, emotion, are rather devalued by societal standards. And I think also in general, right, feminine or women characteristics are devalued and are seen as weak, whereas everything that's more associated with the masculine is seen as something good. And I think women have been also socialized a little bit different, right? I think what's very interesting is the perspective from Tara Moore. So she wrote a book, Playing Big, and there she says that basically this long inequality that we had between men and women has left an internal effect on women. So basically we are still a little bit scared of speaking up or displeasing others, rocking the boat, at least on average more than men, right? And not talking about each and every woman, each and every man. I'm talking always about on average. And these are things that then lead to the fact that we're holding back our opinions more often, are more quiet, and are more tentative in what we say. And we need to unlearn these behaviors, at least to some extent.
And then, so would you say it's more that women with masculine attributes, let's call it like this, successful at the moment? So like women assertive and rough and having a very strong opinion, they are then successful, and then this is seen as a female empowerment or a woman that made it, but actually it's a women behave in a very masculine way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, every person has both sides in them. The question is just what takes on more space, and this is not something static. It's dynamic. It changes from day to day, from period in your life to period in your life. And also men that are successful in the corporate world need to empower much more their masculine qualities than their feminine qualities. And yeah, so that's the same thing for everyone, only that maybe for men it's a little bit more organic, it feels a little bit more authentic, and it's a little bit easier. I think what is really interesting is Mo Gaudat. So he used to be the chief business officer of Google X. And so he's a man, he's a mathematician, engineer by training. So very much actually embodies these masculine qualities and everything that we as a society call successful. And he also said that to become a leader in business, he had to empower his masculine side. And he actually had to very much go into this imbalance. And only recently he has discovered that through empowering more of his feminine side, he actually can be much more effective. And so I find it really interesting that now there's even some men who have discovered that.
I would like to understand, why is it important to you?
Yeah, well, it all started when I read that over half of women leave their career in tech at the midpoint. So this was a study done by McKinsey in 2023. And I mean, I also wasn't really aware of that until I read the study like 2 years ago. I had my own challenges in tech and was thinking, okay, so why am I not speaking more about the topic or passing on my learnings? Because also when I was at Amazon, there was a big Women in AI chapter, and I found it really useful. Like we had community meetups, so you talk to other women, talked about your experiences and challenges, and also they offered a lot of training sessions, like how to deal with imposter syndrome, how to go about your career strategically, how to be visible, all these things. And it really helped me to get this explicit input. Yeah, because I think one of the problems also is that women, and I talked about that also with other leaders, women often have a harder time navigating this corporate environment or figuring out how the game works, let's say. So having these explicit sessions about what you need to do and what is important, and that only doing good work isn't enough. Yeah, that really helped me. And I thought, okay, I mean, it's great that Amazon has it, but what about all the other women in other companies that don't offer all that support? And yeah, that's how I started talking about this topic.
Okay. I have a couple of questions about this. So the first one, this study from McKinsey that so many women leave their career in the middle, something like this, right?
Yeah.
Did they have an explanation why this is the case?
Yeah, so I think they said that one major reason is that they feel like they don't get the support from management that they need. And whenever they want to get a promotion, they feel like they have to change jobs. That was one thing. Another reason, of course, is also the lack of flexibility often, especially like when you want to have a family, and as a woman, it becomes more important that you can be flexible in your work. And I think in general, it's just a little bit of a overall frustration that builds up. They also mentioned in this study that over 70% of women feel that they need to prove themselves because of their gender. I think it's a little bit of this vicious cycle. Like women are not really aware how you need to play this game, right? I think often women still think doing good work is enough. And if you do good work, you get rewarded. But then that doesn't happen. And then you get this frustration and you're wondering why. Maybe you then start to work harder, trying to do even better work. And then you keep wondering why it doesn't pay off.
A sort of a masculine game then you need to play in addition somehow, right?
You feel like you need to be inauthentic to win?
And what are they doing then? Was there any answers? So are they then shifting career to other topics or stop working at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if they stop working completely or what they do afterwards. They didn't really talk about what the women did after leaving.
Then you said at Amazon you had this great women in tech chapter. Were they men complaining about it, that it's unfair, that they don't have this cool trainings?
So, I mean, the trainings were open to everyone. It's not that they were excluded from it. I mean, Amazon offered a lot of personal development training for everyone. And I mean, it was usually online, and it was open to everyone, and there would always be a recording, so no one was really excluded. I mean, sometimes maybe the branding doesn't attract men as much as women, right? If it's branded with women in AI chapter, maybe men don't feel like they need to be there or they want to be there. But no one was really excluded, so there were also no complaints as far as I know.
I recently been to a network event, and there was one guy saying that, I think it's unfair to exclude men from these kind of trainings. There's a lot of women circles, there's no man circles. What would you tell this person? Because I felt it's a wrong perspective.
Well, so I think in general, the majority of events is not like men are excluded, like I said. So, for example, there was the Women in Data and AI Festival in Berlin last year. And yes, there were only women on stage. So no man was on stage. But then men could attend. Again, there, I think men just maybe feel uncomfortable or don't want to or are not interested in attending. There were a couple of men, and they said, oh, it's also kind of awkward to be among so many women. But I mean, that's kind of the experience we have every day, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And then if you look at the normal tech festival, it's usually the other way around. You all have a lot of men on stage, almost no women. The branding may be not attractive, but it doesn't mean you're kind of excluded most of the time. Then maybe there are some women's circles where it's really only for women. And I think there need to be some safe spaces where there are only women, because it makes it much easier to open up about these challenges. It doesn't mean that we are not open to share it also afterwards, or with men, but sometimes there needs to be a safe space for women to open up. And I think men have these safe spaces too. Maybe it's not always called like that, but oftentimes, I mean, if you go to a senior leadership meeting, most likely it's just going to be men, and it's going to be a safe space in that regard. And I mean, also in the end, it's not about men against women or something. It's really, we're happy if, men are interested in the topic, if they join the events, if they want to support women, and they're curious about it. It's not really about excluding them. Yeah.
I even recently saw in Berlin an event for men. So these events also exist, and it was for men that want to fight toxic masculinity. So it's a little bit like a female quality empowerment thing for men. I want to take one perspective. So people might think, okay, if in tech only men want to work in tech, because I think probably you have better numbers, or numbers at all. I don't have numbers at all, but my feeling is that more men are applying for jobs in tech, more men study tech, more men interested in school in physics and mathematics. And then couldn't we say as a society, okay, we accept this, then men do the tech jobs and women do the creative stuff? Isn't it a cool symbiosis of doing things?
Well, I mean, in theory, well, maybe it would be a path, but I think what we learn looking back, for example, at medicine, right, where a lot of men used to be in medicine, and it was basically a science from men for men. So even today, standard medical knowledge doesn't serve women as well as it does men. So even today, sometimes heart attacks in women are not recognized because the standard symptoms are different from men. So if we develop a technology solely by majority from men or by men, that means, again, women's interests and needs are less likely to be represented in the technology. And since AI is really shaping the way we live, the way our society works, it would actually really mean that we're leaving out half of the population. And it's not only an ethical question, it's also a business case. If you develop a technology that doesn't resonate with half of the population, or resonates much less, you're leaving money on the table. And then finally, my experience is, and that's anecdotal, of course, that also women have much more this perspective of ethical AI, secure AI. How do we make sure that the technology is safe? So I think we're bringing different perspectives to the table. Yeah. And And I also want to question or challenge a little bit this. Is it really true that women want to work less in tech? I mean, yes, we're seeing it that less women apply to tech jobs but actually there is and it's also from the McKinsey study, women going into technical fields of study is still kind of high, but then there's a big drop off when it comes to when they move into their first profession. Yeah. And I'm not really sure why that is, but I think part of the reason is that maybe tech is being seen as something that's, very challenging in terms of maybe their dynamic or also having a family later on. And I mean, I also sometimes talk to women that really already have where they think about, okay, how can I raise a family very early on? And then they pick jobs that align with that. And I think that is part of why we see less women in tech. And of course, we also have this social idea that women are less technical. A lot of women have a lot more self-doubt about tech and math. And I think it's also part of how we socialize girls and women.
Yeah, so you're saying it's important because it generates equality also in the society. I had last week a super interesting discussion with someone from Merck. That it's also in a podcast format talking about digital and AI ethics, and he said that trial data, for example, is mostly man-based, so they need to take care of how to prevent that bias from happening. Yeah. I found that really interesting and haven't really thought about it before.
Yeah, it's a big problem in the medical field, right? We have a big data gap for women, and that's really impacting healthcare for women.
And then obviously more women working in tech positions in the medical industry would be more likely to uncover those things on the one hand, but on the other hand also to building technology that is also accessible, more accessible to women, let's say. Also, if you look at the big SaaS tools, like, for example, Celonis, I think is a very masculine brand and probably attracting more more men than women. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case. It's just an impression to me.
I mean, yeah, even the colors, right? You just need to look at the colors of the logo. I mean, yours is different, and I like that.
Thanks. Yeah. I wanted to ask you what's an example of a tech company that attracts more women or does it looks more accessible to women?
Yeah, I remember this one company, I think it's called Melly, and they're creating a personal assistant for the elderly. And I think that is something where I think women would be more drawn to first because it really it has like a great purpose. It's about doing something good. And then I think also this intersection of tech and language is something that women feel more drawn to. I mean, myself included. I also always liked NLP the most within the AI field. Yeah.
And then you said, if you want to share it, you said you made also your own experiences as a woman in tech. You have an example or some experience you want to share? Of course, not mentioning any names or anything specific, but would be curious.
It's often very subtle stuff, right? It's if, for example, people come in and they think you're the designer, you're the product manager, you're the UX designer. People don't think you're in a technical role. I mean, I had even one case, I mean, where then I said, okay, no, I'm a data scientist. And then this person was like, oh, so you can actually program? Like, yes.
Yeah.
So you're actually writing code. So there's a lot of disbelief then when you or surprise when you say, I'm doing tech and I'm good at math and these kind of things. So that's like the smaller and less.
One question: if that would happen to you today, would you say something? So would you say you're saying this because I'm a woman? Also for all listeners, female listeners, would you recommend them to step up and teach this person basically, or would you recommend to stay silent and work on different fronts?
Yeah. So I think the question is always, do you feel that that person can hear your feedback? Because if that person can't hear your feedback and they will just be defensive, you're not making any difference. You're maybe just aggravating the situation. And I mean, I understand that that is frustrating. But again, if the person is not able to hear your feedback, then you're not making any change anyway. So I think trust your gut feeling there. Do you feel like this would be a person that can hear the feedback and understand it? And if not, let it pass then and take it with a sense of humor and maybe say, yes, of course, why not,
Mind play, mind play. So imagine we sitting 3 people in a room, you, me, and a person saying this, and then I would say something. I would say, hey, you did only say this because she's a woman. Would that be appropriate? And would you be happy about it? Or would you think, okay, now this man is trying to fight my battle somehow?
Well, I think that is different from woman to woman. I would welcome it because, I mean, it's always easier to speak up against something if you know you have someone else's support. And like I said, I'm happy about every man supporting me in changing this perception. And I mean, the way I would probably say it is like, hey, look, could it be that you have some unconscious bias here, thinking that because I'm a woman, I'm less technical? Yeah. So really posing it as a question, trying to, and maybe explaining also unconscious bias and letting them know. And yeah, and I also wanted to share another situation. So there was actually one thing that was pretty early on in my career. I was working for a consultancy firm and I was uninvited from a meeting to present my work, with the reason being that the client only wants senior management there.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else presented my work, but I also found out that one of my colleagues or peers, so actually like the guy was more or less the same age, but even joined the company a couple of months after me, but looked a bit more like the typical data scientist. And he was in the meeting and presenting his results. So yeah, that definitely felt like gender bias. And usually it's also something that, I mean, maybe there were other factors at play. It's also always hard to pin down. And at that time, I didn't say anything. I mean, first of all, I also was a little bit overwhelmed, didn't know how to deal with the situation. But even looking back now, I don't think they would have heard my feedback.
Mm.
So, no. And yeah, and like what you said is, instead of addressing it head on, what you can do is rather be visible with your work, show your work, change the perception of what people think of you through the things you contribute.
Also, one thing that I'm thinking about right now, there is this very aggressive and front things against female empowerment. So men that feel maybe they feel threatened by women, and they say it out loud, and it's also clear that they have this position. But isn't the more dangerous thing the structures? Because maybe these people didn't even realize that they did something wrong, and they have never reflected about it.
Yes, I, for example, also had this question once. So there was someone asking me, so why are you writing this newsletter? Why are you so feminist? Did something happen? And then I just started explaining about unconscious bias, and this person was completely surprised. Like they had no idea that things like that exist. Yeah, so often it's really, lack of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I can agree to that. I think I'm, as a man, I'm not alone. I think there's a lot of men, but there's also a lot of women that need to be educated about. We are all one humanity, so to say, and we all need to learn this.
Absolutely. And unconscious bias doesn't only exist in men. Like we women have it too. And I catch myself, judging because of unconscious bias often. So yeah, definitely everyone needs to be educated.
Yeah. Then I also want to highlight a quote which I really was curious about. I read in your newsletter, which is a quote by Dr. Stacy Sims saying, "Women are not small men." What does this mean?
Yeah, so that's a little bit going into that direction that we talked about earlier, right? About this lack of data for women in medicine. So Dr. Stacy Sims, she is an exercise physiologist and she coaches female performance athletes. She's also doing research at a university in New Zealand. And she basically found a similar thing, right? That all this exercise and training advice that is out there is tailored to men, but often not very helpful for women. And the reason in that case is because often the menstrual cycle or women's hormones are not taken into account, and that changes physiology. And it also makes it harder to study women than men. And so often studies just include men. And the reason why I quote that is because I want to encourage people to think about this also in a business context. Yeah, that is coming back to what we said earlier, that, often women are taught to adopt these male behaviors or these behaviors that are more prevalent in men, like assertiveness and dominance. And basically, women are encouraged to just copy that behavior and the leadership blindly, instead of acknowledging that the differences that we have and the strengths that we have are actually a good thing and not something that we should try to get rid of. So it's maybe, it's an inspiration to maybe look at leadership and performance in a different way. So maybe think about how can you perform in a different way? How can you lead in a different way? Or achieve those things in a different way, maybe through more empathy or being more creative, and not just blindly copy. And also, so that's on a high level, but then on a more concrete level, even taking your menstrual cycle into account when it comes to workload planning, if as much as you can. I mean, I understand it's not always 100% possible, but at least plan, for example, for a little bit more rest the last 7 days before your period. I mean, or start observing, right? Maybe you're not someone who feels tired if the last couple of days in your cycle, then okay, maybe you don't need, but maybe you are someone who does. And I have a lot of friends who also have very strong PMS. Yeah, so they go through a lot of pain when they have their period. So the male body, it's easier to deliver the same performance each and every single day. For us women, it's a little bit more circular.
I think I would even say that a lot of people would feel very awkward talking about the menstrual cycle. Is there anything what you think in an ideal world companies should do to cater to this?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's nice if you get days off for your period. I mean, here in Germany, you can call in sick, so that is, and you still get your full pay. But it would be also nice to have more awareness, like educate. And it's not, I mean, the menstrual cycle is one thing, but then the other thing is also women going through menopause, right? You have a huge hormonal change that impacts your whole body and performance. Just creating more awareness, I think, is the first step through education. And again, this is not only for men. I mean, also women often don't know a lot about these topics because it's just still a taboo topic. And I mean, now it's changing. But education, awareness, and then giving people a little bit more flexibility in how they work. I think it's, just focusing more on the outcome instead of maybe the input.
I heard of something that they have a special day off per month, 1 day per month, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do. And I think that's a nice offer because it just normalizes it, right? And it makes it easier for everyone to talk about it and make it not that awkward. Because I mean, if you just take 1 day off or like you call in 1 day every month or 2 days, people might say, okay, that's a little bit too regular. But if you can just speak about it openly, then everyone knows about it, and it would be nice.
On the other hand, I also sometimes, I thought about this before, also back in school in sports classes, that was sometimes women said, okay, I cannot attend a sports. At least some women that use it, but then I also think, isn't it also a little bit fair to then balance out the differences that you already have anyways? So
I mean, there's always ways to take advantage of things, right? In the end, it's always about trust and goodwill. And I think, if you take advantage of it, then maybe there's other reasons, and maybe you would find other ways to take advantage of other things then. I think in the end, it's always about, are you intrinsically motivated or not? And if you are, then you're not taking advantage of any, I mean, even sick days. Yeah. But yes, of course, it's a concern, and I can understand that.
Yeah. Okay. And there's one concept you also talked in your newsletter about, and you made it also very easy for me to prepare for this interview, because there's really great things in that newsletter. You talked about hypermasculinity. Can you explain that concept and what to do with it?
The former chief business officer of Google X, and he talks a lot about hypermasculinity, and he says, sadly, as we empower women today, we force them to become masculine. And that's a little bit what I talked about earlier already. And I mean, coming back to these qualities, right? Masculine, like mind, strength, doing, logic, analysis. That's all we value in today's society. Yeah, that's all we're constantly doing. We're constantly doing, thinking. We think we need to be strong. There's no space for emotion, intuition, or being, creativity. And that is what he calls hyper masculine. And the consequences basically is, or what he argues is that if we overdo one or the other side, it has harmful consequences, right? So if we're too much in the masculine, then, for example, strength leads to violence, or doing leads to headless action at some point. And of course, if you're too much in the feminine, that also isn't good, right? It prevents you from getting things done. You're getting too lethargic, maybe. But what he says, now our world is too much in this masculine state. So we're disconnected from our bodies, from our intuition, from our emotions. We're kind of exploiting the resources that we have on this planet, and we're too much in this masculine side. We're just kind of moving forward without taking a step back and reevaluating where we're going. Yeah. And I think that's also something we see in the tech space. Yeah, we see that often it's about doing a lot of things fast. The tech industry is moving really fast, and it sometimes can feel like headless action. And yeah, and in general, it's also, I think, one of the reasons why women sometimes feel alienated or feel like they need to be inauthentic to be there. And for me, quite frankly, it's not something I felt immediately, or also something I understood immediately. It's something that I later on realized more when I kind of took a step back and decided to become a freelancer. So then basically I realized, okay, I was really very much in the masculine and trying to move more and more into this masculine, and it really got me out of balance. Yeah, even though I was also doing a lot of yoga and meditation already, because I think that was the only way for me to balance out all this masculine energy.
Yeah, there need to be some view from outside on yourself to see it, probably. Otherwise, you would just keep on doing what you're doing.
Well, it's basically this. I mean, I felt out of balance. I felt I didn't feel happy, or I felt, I mean, not all the time, but there were periods where I felt very stressed and just low on energy. And then I think what the realization came through observing myself, but then also reading Mo Gaudat, what he says, but then also understanding that our society really values all the masculine qualities. And I think for me, it was also a little bit of an unconscious, or a driver that made me go into this tech industry, because I wanted to show, okay, women can do that too. And I kind of wanted to prove my value through being successful in this masculine industry.
As the conversation was super insightful, I also changed my last question, because initially it was, how can I as a man, or how can men support your work, or in general female empowerment? But I would turn the question and say, how can people support you and support the concept of female empowerment?
Yeah. So I think it really starts with awareness, educating yourself about your own biases, your unconscious biases, and then, of course, being mindful of them. Yeah. And then I think another big part is just encourage women who do good work, to show their work, to take on more responsibility. I definitely have seen it a lot in women around me that were excellent in what they do, but they were still shy to show their work or be in the spotlight, be visible. So I think encouraging them, or then even advocating for them when they are not in the room, giving good feedback to their managers is really valuable. Becoming an ally or sponsor, and yeah, maybe also talk about letting them know, okay, look, you're doing great work, but maybe not enough people know about it. Maybe you should present it or go on a podcast, or just encouraging them.
Thank you, Verena. I think there was a lot in this conversation. I learned a lot. I feel it was very important to have this conversation about women in tech and AI. And thank you so much for your time and your dedication to that topic. Bye.
Bye.